As the second speaker for the con side, I'll be answering what the first pro speaker mentioned in the first constructive. So first, on their framework, they say that we should vote for a universal basic income if they prove that it's a moral obligation. However, we believe that in the calculus that goes into determining whether or not something is moral, we also have to determine the consequences of that specific policy action, which is why all of the points that we brought up still stand. Next, their first contention was about structural violence and how capitalism makes it worse. But however, remember that if the problem is that the capitalist structure, then they can't solve, because there is no reason why them operating within a government that is capitalist and an economy that is fundamentally geared towards that purpose will allow them to change everything just because you distribute to everyone a free income. In addition, there are so many different arenas where capitalism has found its roots. Things like redlining, housing discrimination, etc. are all policies that they can't solve for, that capitalism has created. This means that they can't solve for most of their impacts, because things like alienation from labor, dehumanizing workers are still possible under a UBI system. Just giving these workers more money doesn't mean that it disempowers the corporations themselves. In addition, they can't solve for it because they don't exactly... In addition, our policy is for the liberals. So we're saying that our policy is a liberal policy, so we're solving for everything. For instance, welfare programs give people more choice. Things like having access to basic healthcare and basic education will allow people to break out of a cycle of poverty much more faster and allow them to break out of the cycle of dehumanization. Next, their second subpoint was about welfare. However, welfare programs are critical to challenge capitalist structures. All the programs that I stated in the past are critical to be able to alleviate poverty. In addition, the cost of a UBI is terrible for the economy. Increasing taxes are the only necessary means of funding for it, because it costs $3 trillion US, and it's independently terrible for the economy because it leads to corporations raising prices to compensate, which puts the burden of the price on the consumers. This leads to inflation and destroys the economy. In addition, liberals will use... Oh, wait, I'll say that later. In addition, this decrease in the economy proves that all of their impacts get much worse, because there will be no jobs in the first place for these people to take, because the economy will suffer. This also means that capitalists will point to this one example of a UBI and prove to you why the greater system of capitalism should be justified, which means that you should not grant them this one victory. Next, their second contention was about solvency. However, they don't solve for poverty. Welfare does. According to an NPR report, welfare is already decreasing poverty levels. Only 11% of the world was in dire poverty compared to 35% in the 90s. Things like welfare policies like universal healthcare, universal education, progressive taxation has been contributed to why poverty has been decreasing, and studies show that a UBI leads to more poverty. Subpoint A is extending our Schultz study. It's a 2017 study that was conducted in countries like France, Italy, and the UK, and saw that poverty rates all increased after a UBI program was implemented. Next, subpoint B is that all countries that participated in an IMF study from a wide range of developed and undeveloped countries experienced an increase in poverty. For France, the UBI program hurt the poor because they were already dependent on welfare programs, and the transition towards UBI led to more poverty. In places like Brazil, because there was no sustainable welfare program there were no facilities like healthcare facilities or education programs for these people to spend their UBI money on. Just giving these people the money doesn't mean that it gives them the programs that will give them a way out of poverty. And the cost of a UBI would also increase poverty because it trades off of welfare. It costs $3 trillion, which means that you'll inevitably have to cut most welfare programs in order to fund for it, which means that because welfare is targeted support for individuals that need it, but UBI is taking away funding for the poor and redistributing to everyone. Think about it. Things like food stamps, education. I keep repeating this, but it's because it's that important. It's the fact that welfare can solve for most of the problems that they're talking about, because the facilities are just more targeted to the poor.